Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight we are going to have a follow-up episode. This is an episode that is following up an episode that took place on the Contrarians. So we're looking at the Styx album from 1983, Kilroy was here. So we've got Todd Evans here, we've got Paul Simon. This album, a bit controversial. We're going to look at it. Is this really the worst Styx album ever made? So without any further ado, let's get started.
Crank up those headphones. It's time for Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight is a bit of a follow-up episode to an episode that happened on the Contrarians. We looked at a dark horse episode of Styx. Kilroy was here. This record came out in 1983, but we have some people that want to weigh in on this. So as we all know, you could look back. I'll put the link below about that episode, but Martin gave this record a 0, which I thought was a little harsh. I think Rand gave it like a 4 or a 5, and I can't remember what I gave it, but these two gentlemen here want to weigh in. So they couldn't make it to the other episode, so this is like a part 2 to what happened. So anyway, Kilroy Was Here was the 11th studio album from Styx. If anyone knows this was considered a concept album, a rock opera about rock music is outlawed. This was a whole Dennis DeYoung thing, you know. And if you watch the behind the music on Styx, you know that Tommy Shaw and JY just absolutely hated it. Well, I don't know. Is it really this bad? Like I said, Martin Popoff gave this a 0 out of 10. I'm going to throw this over to these two gentlemen, and we're going to see what they think. Well, let's throw it over to Paul because he's a newbie on this channel. He's not been on my channel before, but I want to welcome Paul here to the show. And of course, Todd Evans is here, and we all know Todd. Paul Simon, this is what I want to do. I want you to give your basic review of the record, tracks you like, and I want to hear a rating out of 10. And then we can just discuss it and see where it goes.
Okay. It is a confused album. I'm not here to say that it is a dark horse album, that the reviews were absolutely off the mark, and I'm not here to do that. What I am here is to define that a little more clearly. I think that this album had, the first time we met, I was on a crossover between the Contrarians and Rush fans, and I used the phrase undercooked. This is a very undercooked album with a lot of ideas it didn't know what to do with, and they didn't go very far with them. I think they had a lot of potential that got spoiled, and I think it's actually two albums that kind of butted heads with each other. You've got Dennis's stuff, and then you've got Tommy and JY's stuff.
Right.
So Dennis stuff, you've got Mr. Roboto, you've got Don't Let It End, you've got High Time, you've got Dennis and Tommy with Haven't We Been Here Before, and then you've got Don't Let It End, the reprise. Martin did use a phrase I have to agree with, and I love with Don't Let It End, the reprise, which was a dog's breakfast. Don't Let It End, the reprise. I can't defend that. I know what Dennis was trying to do with it. It fell completely flat for me. So his 0 rating, I'm going to apply it to Don't Let It End, the reprise. For me personally, it's an opinion, but I share that for that track.
Okay.
As far as standouts for me, I saw a lot of comments in there saying the 8-year-old me, the 9-year-old me, the 10-year-old me. I was one of those people. I heard this album when I was 9. I fell in love with it, and it carried over. So there's that nostalgia factor, and that was discussed during the episode. So standout tracks for me were the singles, because this was my first exposure to Styx, and I went immediately back to Paradise Theater and worked my way backwards. So the 80s were big. The early 80s were all about abstracts and big show. If you watch Caught in the Act, the concert film from this, they were all wearing pastels and shoulder pads, and it was goofy. this is what people were doing. And let's not lose sight of the fact that they were trying, let's be honest, to sell records. Right or wrong, that's what they were trying to do, and they were successful. Mr. Roboto went to, I think, number 3 in the U.S. Don't Let It End went to number 6 the week of July 2nd of 1983. This was a very successful album, like it or not. They booked a tour in small venues. I think this album was written for, you and I had discussed, Grant, that this was it was written for like a Paradise Theater 2 almost. It had that feel.
It's got that, Paul, you're 100%. It's got that same production.
Yes.
It's got that same quality of sound. So, it was recorded at Pumpkin Studios. I don't know. It sounds the same.
It does. Agreed.
And the place that they're supposed to meet, the place that they're supposed to meet to save rock is the Paradise.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Jonathan Chance, Tommy Shaw, and Mike Damone from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Robert Romanus. So from the concert film. But they even booked small theaters for this tour. And then when the album exploded, they didn't even expect it to do that well. Then they had to switch that up and then book larger venues and show the movie instead. So they didn't even expect it to be as big as it was. So tracks that meant something to me. I loved Haven't We Been Here Before? I actually, and they made a video for it. I think the vocals are amazing. I think that's very underrated. Is it the word sterile came up a lot in the Dark Horse episode. And I do agree. It is very early 80s sterile sounding.
Well, but I don't want to interrupt, Paul. I don't want to interrupt. But there was a critique. If you've ever heard JY and Tommy talk about this record, everything after Pieces of 8 started to sound a bit sterile. It started with Cornerstone. Cornerstone's not quite as bad as this, and I'm not saying this is bad, but there was something about Grand Illusion and Pieces of 8. I mean, those had that analog quality. This was analog too, but I don't know what it was how it changed. Maybe but you know what I'm saying.
I do.
Yeah, okay.
I do. That's why I'm not sitting here saying this. You guys are all off the mark, and this. No, there's a soul behind it, or a heart, or a warmth, or something behind it that was starting to go away. I do agree. Yeah, I'm not here to say that you missed the mark on that. You didn't. But in the meantime, it was selling albums. It was more of a pop. I use the phrase Broadway pop.
Right.
And it was selling records. They became more of, they went more towards that sound, but it wasn't just Dennis. That's one of the things I'm here to say is it wasn't just Dennis, because if you listen to this stuff after Dennis left the band, was kicked out, whatever, I'm not here to go for that. But if you listen to Girls with Guns and What If from Tommy, I heard a lot of sterile sounding keyboards there. If you listen to JY's album with Jan Hammer, City Slicker, I hear a lot of sterile sounding keyboards and synths in that album. So we cannot sit here and play the Dennis card on that, because that was their sound. That's one of the main points I did want to make.
That's a good point, Paul, because that's a good point. Because listen, okay, you think Tommy Shaw broke away from Styx, okay? You would think Tommy would be rocking hard to Unleash, but listen to Girls with Guns, listen to What
I have
If.
a lot to say about this.
Okay, we can talk about these.
I'll wait my turn.
No, you're good, Todd. We're keeping it loose.
I said the majority of what I said.
General discussion.
Jump in. Yes.
Paul, if you don't know about this, on my channel, I like to keep it loose, and you can just say your piece, and we'll just do it. Please. But I don't think it's fair. You are 100% right. We didn't bring this up on the Contrarians episode. But look at the JY album, look at the Tommy Shaw albums, and compare it to this. Okay.
And what song was it that broke Styx? It was Lady.
Thank you.
And
Correct.
They were not complaining about that at the time. And what was the first thing that Tommy Shaw brought to this band? Crystal Ball, a ballad.
A ballad, yeah. I mean, you have to admit, Crystal Ball is a gem in the catalog.
It certainly is.
But he did that with his previous band. It wasn't new. They'd been playing it. But yeah, it's a ballad. Okay. Oh, God, this is such a great episode. You're right.
Boat on a River, Man in the Wilderness, Queen of Spades. Start looking through the catalog. How did we get to this point?
I don't know. It was established early on. But the thing is, well, okay, we can cover this a little bit, but don't forget, back in the day, in those wooden nickel records, you had a lot of James Young songs, which I have no issues with that. I like James Young. But when Lady took off, 1975, had been out for 2 years, but that radio station in Chicago picked it up and they started playing it. Well, that gave Dennis a little bit more momentum. So on Equinox, I mean, that's basically all Dennis on that record. See, that's always been a power play with Styx. You know, if you have a hit, well, that person gets control. I'm sure this happens with a lot of bands, but Styx is like the big band that really happens with.
Fleetwood Mac, 2 words. But anyway, continue.
Okay. No, you're right. We can talk all about this. This is great. Now I don't know what my point was, but what I'm saying is Styx, that's how it worked.
Yes.
You can see behind the music. I don't know if they were egging Tommy and JY on to get more drama, but they can edit it that however they want it, you know. Think about this. Styx now is playing Roboto, and that's a song that they hated. I'll leave it right there.
They say they hated it. I wonder.
And let me tell you something. Tommy Shaw and James Young have been humiliating Dennis DeYoung since that show, which was what, 1999, 1998? And
Todd, I think it was even earlier than that.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't know. Paul, what do you think? What's your thoughts on that? Paul shakes his head.
Part of me wants to say, how's the view from the cheap seats? Because it does. Because it was I fall back to what I said earlier with their sounds when they had their big break. Mm-hmm. What did they sound like? They still sounded like Styx. When they went to replace him, they replaced him with people who sounded like him. They replaced him with people who played like him.
Yep. Let me ask you this. Think about all the signature songs that Styx has, and think about specifically Dennis DeYoung's signature songs. Mm-hmm. What is Lawrence Gowan's signature song?
He doesn't have one.
He doesn't have one. He's a very talented man with a very, very good voice that has no vision.
I mean,
maybe
in
they
Canada,
didn't like Dennis DeYoung's vision, but
in Canada, though, Lawrence has success. He's had singles, he's had hits, but he's brought it back into Styx, and now he's just a Dennis clone.
He doesn't have a plan for what he wants to bring to Styx, other than sounding like Dennis.
And I think I thought of this earlier too. Kilroy was here. Besides their personality clashes that we have already begun to talk about, which were brewing way before Kilroy was here. I saw something as I was reading through the liner notes that jumped out at me. I'm not as schooled on them as I am, say, Rush, for example, but produced by Styx. With all that interplay going on, if they had a producer who would have reined that in, there are some, like I started to say earlier, there's some gems in there. Take Heavy Metal Poisoning, for example, which was kind of beat up a little bit. And I'm the first to say that Kilroy Was Here is very cheesy. It is very ham-handed in its messaging, and it's all over the place with what it was trying to do. But like I said, it's different. It's 3 different things at least. But take Heavy Metal Poisoning, for example. When I was getting ready for this, I listened to the album numerous times. I read the liner notes. I watched the concert. But on the DVD for the concert, it also has, as bonus materials, the music videos they shot for it. they shot so much footage. You can see the stills on the back album cover and on the inside of it. The video for Heavy Metal Poisoning is part of the short film that you can tell that they were putting together for all this. There's choreography, there's character development, there's even, and when I'm talking heavy-handed, I mean very corny and heavy-handed, but they're going to early versions of conversion therapy, where they're trying to like turn a kid who's a heavy metal kid into this, like they show him like giving him a haircut and converting him, and they comes out with a pencil protector and button down shirt and tie and all that. It's like that's a pretty. The way I was thinking of it was when they got angry because that they were nailed for Snowblind having backward masking lyrics, which wasn't true anyway. It reminded me of like when Neil Peart got angry. When Neil Peart got angry, he wrote 2112. When Roger Waters got angry, he wrote The Wall. When Styx gets angry, you've got James Young writing Heavy Metal Poisoning. You've got Dennis Young writing High Time, and you've got Tommy Shaw writing Haven't We Been Here Before? So
yeah, but
A, you've got different voices, and B, it's kind of poppy and cheesy because they're Styx.
But think about this, Paul. I just want to throw this out there. JY and Tommy didn't have their hearts in this. If you watch that video, that the interview with Tommy, said, I can't write songs about robots.
But he can write a song like Cold War is my point.
That's one of his most nonsensical answers, because this is not about robots. And there's only one song about robots, and he was never asked to write a song about robots.
Okay.
So,
there you go.
That's one of his most nonsensical quotes.
That's him trying to
sour
slam.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
He wrote Cold War.
Right.
He wrote Cold War. Read the lyrics to Cold War and watch the live version of Cold War on Caught in the Act. That's Tommy's middle finger to the Arkansas State Legislature for what they did to them over the lyrics. And JY wrote Heavy Metal. Think about it,
with the content of the content of the record, the what do I want to say? Concept of the record, it fits right in.
Yes, it does.
All right.
That's why I'm saying it's all over the place. That doesn't make it a good album, but you can tell where they went with it. They went in 3 different directions with the album. That's why it doesn't make any sense. That's why I'm not giving it a higher rating or saying you guys are, I disagree. Well, I agree that it's a mess, but it's a mess where you can connect the dots and follow the lines with it at least. It's not, that's why I'm saying it's not a Dennis disaster piece. It's all of them going in different directions.
Right. And there's no one on this record that are all like totally into it. Bingo. Dennis's concept, I don't think Dennis has any issues on this record at all. His material, I think, stands up. Okay. It's everyone else is the problem.
And that's why I think that's why they're doing the, Dennis this and Dennis that. Me personally, it's an opinion. I'm not saying I'm correct. But right. I think they're going, with you. Dennis did this.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think that's well. Let's say this. Think I'm embarrassed. Well, is there Paul? This is such a great discussion. Good God, what a great record to revisit. But all right, Paul. Let's say this. What would you rate this record out of 10?
I've been thinking about it since that last episode. Because it's so messy, I give it a 5. I give it a 5 because I think the talent and the songwriting the parts are greater than the sum. I think the parts, there's talent in the performances, and the songs as an album. For starters, throw the word concept as an album out the window.
Well, it's a loose concept.
It's an extraordinarily loose, like spaghetti. But yes, you're right. I mean, I'm saying the only way I can enjoy it is either as a 9-year-old with nostalgia, or when I'm saying when I put on Just Get Through This Night. That is an awesome Tommy Shaw song to me. If I listen to Haven't We Been Here Before, to me, that is still Dennis and Tommy cranking their voices. They sound great together. If I listen to High Time or even Mr. Roboto, Don't Let It End to Me is a worthy successor of the early 80s. Granted, we're talking again back to the pastels and the shoulder pads and all that, but Don't Let It End sounds like the early 80s follow-up to the guy who wrote Lady and Babe.
Oh,
doing
Paul,
what
I
he
totally
thinks
agree.
everyone expects him to do.
Yeah.
Bringing what he thinks everyone wants him to bring.
Yes.
Well, but
He said
the thing
he
is,
said
though,
words
Todd,
very close to that.
he's had success with that.
Yes. So why would he do it any different?
Why would he do anything different? You know,
Watch the live versions, watch Caught in the Act. Rather than revisiting the album, and I know that was the whole point of this, but watch the live versions from Caught in the Act and you'll see what they wanted those songs to actually be. Cold War has a little bit more of a rock and guitar solo. It is crazy with the new wave. You guys made a great point on that first Dark Horse episode.
yeah, that
how
was
they were
Martin, I think. Martin said,
and he made a great point. They were trying way too hard to go new wave because the camera angles and the glitzy early 80s chintzy special post-production effects and stuff.
Too much time
Very
on my hands
distracting.
worked for them. It worked for them.
good
It did.
point, Todd.
So they were going to do it again.
Yep.
But there's
Totally right.
there's solos that aren't on the album. Dennis does some vocal improv at the end of Don't Let It End. That sounds really cool for the time. He takes it just in a it's not going to win any Grammys anytime soon, but it's just very cool. It's kind of heartfelt, and the theatrics are there, and for what they made, it just sort of enhances it a bit. There's a little bit more heart to each song. And even there's a little bit of vocal crack on Haven't We Been Here Before, so it's not flawless, but there's a little bit more heart behind each song.
What do you think it hurts this record? I'm throwing this out to both of you gentlemen. Do you think this hurts this record that it's labeled as a concept record? Because you listen to all these songs, I don't really see how these all fit together. It's just like a collection of songs. Do you think that people look at this as a concept record and maybe just disregard everything here? Maybe we should look at it songs. Martin Popoff, when we looked at I'm not picking on Martin. He said there were no songs on this record. I don't know.
I'm not going to comment on that.
Well, you can comment on it. We're not picking on
I-
anybody, but like I said, this is why we're having a follow-up episode, because I think it needed another.
They didn't finish the concept.
We need to look at it again.
They
That's
were
all I'm
sloppy.
saying.
They
I
didn't
think
finish the concept.
I think
that
that there are
wait a
a
minute,
couple of ways to look at this.
All
I
right.
don't think that calling this a concept album hurts it. I think it is one. But another thing about this record is that it's only 8.5 songs.
Okay.
So had it been longer, they would have been destroyed for going too far and making it too much of a big thing. And so they did something that was very safe, and they did something that was that should have been non-controversial, and that's make a short album, a 40-minute record. And I think the songs do hold together, but I have more to say about that. But I don't think calling it a concept record hurts it. I think the same way about Paradise Theater. Paradise Theater is also not all it could have been. But I think if they had taken it to that next level and made it a double album or something like that, then it would have been there would have been a lot of people all over it saying Styx is getting too big for their britches. They're just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bloated and all those code words that people use for bands that do big things. And so, for that reason, I think that I go a little easier on it. So
That's fair. Well, I don't think I think, you look at Paradise Theater as a concept, I guess, but it's, you look at the beginning of it and maybe the end of it, there's your concept. I don't think anything else in between even.
I think this hangs together
lends
better
to
than
a
that.
concept.
I'm not saying it's a better album, but I think as a concept album, it hangs
Right.
together. But you could also argue that a light concept album was the kind of thing that they were trying to do.
Right.
That they were trying to do a concept album that didn't get you too bogged down into, it's not Quadrophenia. It's not Tommy.
Does the concept have to mean depth?
Though a lot of people can't keep track of what's going on Tommy or Quadrophenia, so I'll leave it there.
Or The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. But I wanted to say one thing about what Paul said about them being in bright colors and shoulder pads. I wish I had a prop to hold up, but you know who else did that? Rush did that. Everyone was doing that.
Yeah.
And personally, that's my favorite Rush fashion era. But because I think they wore it well. But they weren't alone there.
I liked them on the Moving Pictures tour. I thought they looked good.
Grace Under Pressure is my favorite, but
that's
anyway,
even more extreme
as far as the look.
Right. But it is what it is.
Okay.
But, I'm just curious. I'm going to throw this out to both of you guys. Do you think that the songwriting on Paradise Theater was stronger than what's on this record?
If I had to choose, yes.
Yes.
But I don't think that what Paul said about there being strong moments on this album are that's a complicated question with a complicated answer.
Yeah.
I just keep thinking that, I don't know. It's hard for me to get through the whole. I keep thinking that Kilroy here was a total concept record. I know there's weaknesses here, but when this came out back in the day, I heard it and I went, "Oh, good God! Houston, we have a problem."
Great.
Same when I heard Cheap Trick, All Shook Up. I thought, uh-oh, Houston, we have a problem. Now, both of these records, if I look at them today, I look at All Shook Up a lot different than when it came out. And I look at this a lot different when it came out too. I think this is aged better, and I think All Shook Up's aged better. But that's because I can look at what came later, and I'm going, well, this record's not quite as good. This makes Kilroy look pretty damn good. Or what's down in the, let's say we're looking at The Doctor by Cheap Trick. You look at that and you look at All Shook Up. All Shook Up looks brilliant compared to The Doctor. Just saying. No,
I understand what happened. Almost, this is going to be a horrible analogy.
No, go ahead. This is what we're doing. We're just keeping it loose.
Almost like a post-mortem. I understand what happened now with this. Looking over time with Kilroy was here, looking at the facts, as opposed to the interviews that were thrown our way, as we've discussed, and looking at everything from chart positions to the releases after, because we've already brought up City Slicker and Girls with Guns and What If, but we didn't bring up what was a success. Desert Moon.
That was okay.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, before I want to go ahead and do my review if that's okay, because
please go, Todd. Go.
We may have more to discuss after I get done. So the thing the thing I want to start out with is that I think it's easy to forget how big Styx were. So say, for example, you're thinking about a Styx concert. Okay, so who goes to a Styx concert? Well, it's the people that go to a Foghat concert or whatever. Pick a band. But it's also kids as young as 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, band geeks, musicians, all kinds of girls. I took a date to this show and she was blown away. She looked at me halfway through and she said, "Are all concerts like this?" And I was like, actually, not really. But I found this, and I don't know where I got this, but there was like hype for this album. People were waiting for this record. So I wanted to show my Dr. Righteous t-shirt. I tried to wear this, and that was not going to happen. But there you go right there. And then
I've never seen one of those,
on the
Todd.
back, Kilroy, Long Live Rock. Majority for musical morality.
That's
We can stop
awesome.
the heavy metal poisoning of America. And then there's the tour book, which shows one of the Robotos striking Dennis DeYoung. A lot of really cool stuff in here. All of these, these spreads with, the people, the characters and what their names were. And I think it's funny that there's this part right here in the film. All the prisoners eat Dr. Righteous fried chicken, and it looks like KFC. And but one of the things I noticed is that the character's name, John Panazzo, was Colonel Hyde, and he was a reformed drummer who became an expert in brainwashing. And Chuck Panazzo was Lieutenant Vanish, and he was a reformed bassist. All of his other information was destroyed in a fire. So all of this stuff is really creative. I think this particular shot is really cool. I just think that that's awesome.
Yeah, I like that.
But let me tell you, I was reading in this thing, and I want to share something that I saw in here. And let me see if I can remember where it was. There's some quotes from, here it is. This is a quote from James Young. Styx talks about Kilroy was here. This is James Young. We all feel great about the material on Kilroy was here. We took our time and did it right. Well, Kilroy was here is the story of the post-World War II baby boom and the banning of the most powerful social, political, and artistic force, rock and roll, of our generation. Okay? So, Chuck Panazzo says, we've taken a step beyond paradise. With Kilroy was here, the concept and stage presentation will leave little doubt to our fans that indeed Kilroy was here and Styx was here. Tommy Shaw says, to me, it's a classic story of can good conquer evil? We don't really answer that question. We can just say we hope so. So here's what I really have to say about this record, okay? So Tommy Shaw has done a whole lot of interviews where he has said, Styx is a rock band. Mm-hmm. I'm a rock musician, and Styx is a rock band. Okay, so what does Tommy Shaw, Mr. Rock and Roll, Mr. Styx is a rock band? What does he bring to this record? He brings 2 ballads and Cold War. Now, Just Get Through This Night, I think, is his best song. I think it is absolutely his best song. I think that it's really super great, for lack of better words. And Cold War. It's funny, I like Cold War, but listen to Cold War, written by Tommy Shaw. Listen to Mr. Roboto, written by Dennis DeYoung, and you tell me which one rocks more. I think probably Mr. Roboto does. And Haven't We Been Here Before was written by Tommy Shaw. He and Dennis DeYoung sing it as a duet, but Tommy brought that song. Tommy wrote that song. Mm-hmm. Here's my point. Tommy was into this. JY was into this. I think that any claim that they weren't or that they didn't try is bullshit. And I think it's always been bullshit. And I just don't think, I think, this album, I think Mr. Roboto is amazing. I think Cold War is pretty good. It kind of sounds like Too Much Time on My Hands too. I think Don't Let It End is almost as good as The Best of Times. And I think that the little keyboard coda at the end of it is probably the finest moment on the album. High Time, I'm not crazy about. I'm not crazy about the doo-wop thing, but I think it's kind of in the vein of Nothing Ever Goes As Planned, like the album before it. But I think Nothing Ever Goes As Planned is a little better.
Yeah, it's better.
So I think High Time is kind of a weak point. But Heavy Metal Poisoning is all over the place. I mean, when JY starts singing that song, you're like, oh my, what's happening here? But then it goes into this thing, then you get to figure out what it's about. And then at the end, you've got little children singing sex and drugs and rock and roll. So it's really pretty bold. but it's also kind of cringeworthy. So it's kind of all over the place. And then
Okay.
you've got get through this night, which is great. Go ahead, Grant. I'm sorry.
No, I love this conversation. I absolutely love it, but it kills me. So you look at Heavy Metal Poisoning. How much different is it from Eddie on Cornerstone, though?
It's very different.
Which is better? Because I thought Eddie was the weakest point, and normally James Young brings it to the record. I like Cornerstone, get me wrong, but I think Eddie was probably the weakest link on the record.
I think that both Snowblind and Eddie, even Eddie, are better than Heavy Metal Poisoning. But
Yeah,
I
agree.
understand where it fits in the concept, and I like what he did with it. And I find it really hard to believe that JY wasn't into that he didn't think that was fun.
Right.
Because he certainly played it up really well. And he's the best actor out of all of them. When you watch that film, he's the one that's hamming it up the most, and I think is the most effective. Just Get Through This Night, I already talked about. I think it's really, really good. Double Life, again, not as good as Snowblind, but I think that the Dennis DeYoung keyboard part at the beginning and the end makes it seem like a collaboration. And there's even a kind of a proggy solo where Dennis is playing that Castle Walls kind of arpeggiated thing in the middle, and that's kind of a good moment on the album, I think. And then you've got Haven't We Been Here Before, which is, again, another good song, sung really well. And I think that Just Get Through This Night and Haven't We Been Here Before are JY's best vocals. I mean, I'm sorry, Tommy Shaw's best vocals.
I can't argue with that. I
think that's one of the best performances that he's ever done. Now, I'm not going to say that this album isn't flawed. Much like Paul said, I'm not going to say that. I think Don't Let It End Reprise is a misstep. And I don't like the whole Chuck Berry, Little Richard thing at the end. I don't think that Dennis pulls that off.
No.
And I actually don't think it's necessary. I think it would have been much more effective had they done a real rock thing that bordered on metal at the end.
Yeah.
I think that would have been much more effective. I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now. I loved this album then. And I've always said that this concert is one of my favorite concerts that I've ever seen, but I've never liked Don't Let It End Reprise. And when the end of the album fails like that, then, you've got an issue. But I would give this record a 7.5, because I think Mr. Roboto is just spectacular. And don't forget that, when was that? Early 2000s, when that was in that Volkswagen commercial?
Yeah.
And everybody went bananas.
Yes,
over
they
Mr.
did.
Roboto.
Well, it breathed new life
and for
into it.
good reason, because it doesn't sound like anything else. And the thing that bothers me the most about Styx and their legacy is that Dennis was the person that had the vision of what that band should be. Otherwise, they would have just been a band from Chicago that had a couple of good records. Mm-hmm. But when Dennis breaks out and does, Light Up and Lorelei and Sweet Madam Blue,
right,
and it just takes off from there, he's the guy with the vision. And how they repaid him was by humiliating him and continuing to, Tommy and JY, continuing to humiliate him for decades. And that's my real problem. Yeah. That's my real problem with Styx. And Styx has made a couple of pretty good albums, but they're just pretty good albums. There's no vision on any of those records. On The Mission, on Crash of the Crown.
Oh my God, The Mission's great.
But is it?
Yeah, I think
does it really?
That was my album of the year for that year.
As well as a Styx album that Dennis is driving. Well, I mean, we'll just have to disagree on that. But I don't think it does.
I'm thinking, think about when it came out and what other albums were out then. The fact that they're putting out a concept album in, what was it, 2017?
But that's just not enough for me. For Styx to come out with an album that's just, wow, that's pretty good, is just, it just isn't enough for me.
My goodness,
I expected more
Tom.
out of that album. I expected more out of Crash of the Crown, and Cyclorama is just plain bad. Cyclorama just isn't good.
Mm.
So that may be contrarian and it may not be.
I don't know,
But,
but I think Cyclorama would be a good record to look at.
It would. Maybe I'll stay away from that one.
No, I think you'd need to be on that one to look at it.
But I agree with
Cover
what Paul
enough
said
Styx on the
about this record
Contrarians.
being flawed. I can't give it any more than a 7.5. I would love
7.5.
to, but I can't. But I think that there are a couple of really good moments in it.
Yeah, I wouldn't throw it out, like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I would
Yeah.
not do that. It's got good moments. It's got some bad moments. But like I said in the Contrarian show, I don't think the band, you guys could tell me something different, but I don't think they were in a good spot. I think these guys were tired by this point.
I think they were too.
All this touring and Paradise Theater and, ever since Grand Illusion, they were just a machine. I think by the time they got here, I appreciate Dennis DeYoung coming up with the concept. I think it's great, but I just think that everybody was tired. Other than Dennis, I think Dennis shines on this record. But
there's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of interviews with these guys, and one of the things that was made an impression on me is that when I watched an interview with Dennis about what's the name of the album that came after Return to Paradise? Now I can't remember the name of it.
Was that Cyclorama?
No, the one before that, the first one where Dennis came back.
Oh,
or where Tommy came back. I can't remember the name of it now. The purple one. But anyway,
Brave New World.
Yes, thank you. When that came out, or a couple of years later than that, Dennis DeYoung said, or Tommy Shaw said, Dennis showed up and he just went in his own corner of the studio and he just worked on his own stuff. And we thought we were going to be a band again. And then you hear Dennis's story, and Dennis says, "This is what we always did. I always worked on my stuff by myself." And so when you hear that kind of back and forth, it really makes you wonder, where's the truth at in this?
Well, for some reason,
I'm not sure.
Todd, I want to hear. I think Dennis has the truth.
Well, and here's the thing. This is something that I really want to say about Dennis. I followed Dennis on Facebook this was probably like 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And Dennis used to write these really long diatribes on Facebook. And they were all over the place. I mean, politically, they were all over the place. They didn't make any sense almost because he was so not centered. And he was just going on and on and on. And I thought to myself at that time, if I was Tommy and JY and this guy, Dennis, if he really was this much of a blowhard and wouldn't shut up, I thought to myself, if I were Tommy, I might look at JY and I might say, wouldn't this be fun if that guy wasn't here all the time? I might say that. I understand why they wanted to part ways with him. I really do. But I also think it was a really big mistake. I think that Dennis DeYoung is the kind of guy, much like John Anderson of Yes, that you just deal with. Because you're going to be stronger if he's there than you're going to be if he's not there. And so I actually think that Dennis DeYoung is not replaceable in Styx. And I know that may be a controversial statement, but I don't think he's replaceable.
And I don't think
they've
he's
ever
been
been the same.
replaced. He hasn't been replaced.
But I understand why they fired him. I just think it was a bad idea.
It all gets down to money, is what it is.
In this case, it probably does.
It probably does. But Styx has never been the same,
No.
Very true.
But it's like, if you listen to that first Styx record, when God, now I can't remember. I just said what it was.
What, Brave New World?
Brave New World.
Yeah.
But if you listen to that record, I don't know. What's your thoughts on Brave New World? I mean, everybody's back together. You think that
I think
chemistry would be back?
I think it's okay. I think it sounds disconnected. I think it sounds like a band that's not communicating with each other. But again, and I say this about a lot of Styx records, I think Tommy's performance is strong.
Well,
Now, I will
Tommy
say this
always
about
comes
Styx.
through.
I will say this about Styx. They're a very good band live.
Oh my God, yeah.
You go see Styx, you're going to have a good time.
Mhm.
And I saw a double bill. This must have been, I don't know, 2011, something like that.
Mhm.
It was a double bill with Yes and Styx. And they took turns. Opening like every other night. Styx would open and then Yes would open. And the show that I saw, Yes went on first.
Mhm.
And this was, the current version of Yes. Chris Squire was still there, but without John Anderson. And it was embarrassing. Styx just destroyed Yes. And I'm a huge Yes fan. Styx was so good, I couldn't believe it. Part of their heart is gone because Dennis isn't there. A big chunk of them is gone. But as performers, they're great. So, I mean, I've done a lot of bashing of JY and Tommy, but I just wanted to say that as performers, they're still bringing
They
it.
still
They're
bring
very,
it.
very strong.
The
Yeah.
current edition of Styx still brings it. I do agree. 100%.
But if Dennis was there in his buttoned-up shirt and his short hair singing those songs, it would be better.
I agree.
I jumped ship completely. I never got into Styx again after that. I never gave them another try. I went with Shaw Blades and then Damn Yankees.
Yeah.
Shaw Blades is a
anything-
good record.
And anything records and anything that Tommy and Jack wrote for other people. So you're talking Jude Cole, you're talking Vince Neil, you're talking anybody they wrote for. If I could get my hands on it or found out about it, I was into that. So the stuff they wrote for Cole was amazing.
Yeah, I saw that Shaw Blades tour where they made that album of the covers. And I can't remember the name of the album now, but
Influence.
I've never heard
they
that
did
one.
Your Move.
Their cover of
one.
Dirty Work. You want to talk heresy or you want to talk contrarian? Their cover of Dirty Work. I will listen to that before I'll listen to Steely Dan's version. That
So
will
will
get me
I.
comments.
Paul, that's a strong statement.
I know it is.
So will I,
I
though.
love their version
And
of
I
Dirty Work.
love their version of Your Move by Yes. I think it's great.
Yes.
I think they're.
And it's an amazing version.
Why do you guys make me?
Performer.
Why do you guys make me spend money? I've
Influence,
never heard it, but
Brand.
now I'm going to look for
Influence.
it. I know. Yeah,
That'll
that's
be the
what it
next
is.
episode we can do together.
You're influencers.
Yeah.
There we go. That'll be our next episode.
There you go. A show on Shaw Blades, the catalog of Shaw Blades.
Happily.
No one talks about that. Holy crap. I like that first Shaw Blades record.
Yep. And the other artists that they wrote for.
Mhm. There you go. An
I'm not
episode
aware
in
of that,
itself.
Paul. Can you tell us about some of that? I didn't know that they wrote stuff for other people.
Vince Neil, you're invited, but your friend can't come. His solo album, So You're Talking Forever. The follow-up single to You're Invited, but Your Friend Can't Come. Cole, So You're Talking Worlds Apart.
Yeah.
Come on. The other single off that album, or was it the other album? View from Third Street. I think they co-wrote with that.
Mhm.
Of course, I didn't prepare, so I'm blanking
Oh no,
on
it's okay.
them.
That's
I
all
put you on
right.
the spot. That's cool. I wasn't
No
aware of
big
that.
deal.
Start.
Paul,
It's a start.
you come on this channel, you get used to that. It just comes at you from all angles.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
So Paul, let's follow up with you real quick. What was Todd, you gave it a 7.5 or
I gave it a
7?
7.5.
7.5. Paul, what would you
Yes.
give Kilroy
Oh,
out of 10?
I'm trying to avoid the nostalgia trap. And
Look at it like let's say this was the debut album. That's one way to look at it. Try
Well, that
not
would
to
be a
look at
weird
what came
debut
before.
album.
I don't know. Well, I know, but how does it stand
that'd be a
up
strong
there?
debut. That's some talent there.
So you like
Right.
it as a debut?
I think that actually bumped it up. I'll give it a 6.5 for a debut.
Look at that. I can't
Yeah, if I
remember
heard
what I
Mr.
gave it.
Roboto and didn't
But
know
they
who
show
Dennis DeYoung
promise.
was.
It's messy, but they show promise.
Yeah. If I heard Mr. Roboto and didn't know who that was, I would be like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, there's not, I kind of put like Roboto in that same genre or that same early 80s thing, like pop music by M. Not really, but it's still kind of in that. No?
Another thing I did was I tried to listen to what they were. I went back a year because Paradise Theater was 81, Kilroy was 83. So I went back to 82. February of 82, I checked out Billboard's Hot 100 because another thing that was mentioned was the keyboard sound. And again, how sterile it sounded. And I checked to see what keyboard sounds were going on in February of 82. Leather and Lace. Do You Believe in Love came up. Young Turks from Rod Stewart was on there. What else was on there? Tainted Love, Abacab, Waiting for a Girl Like You. These were all songs. Freeze Frame. These were all songs that were on February of 82's Hot 100. So I'm like, that's where the keyboard sound came from that ended up in 83, at least was going through their ears at the time. That's some pretty heavy hitters.
Well, I want to follow. Go ahead, Tom.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Grant.
No, it doesn't matter. We're just.
I was going to say, you have to remember with the advances in electronics and with it was easier to get those sounds. Back in the 70s, the guys that played synths back then had to work really hard to get those sounds. They had to come up with twisting dials and knobs and trying to get everything perfect and going through effects. Now they had digital keyboards where they could just mash buttons and get those sounds. So it was much easier. So that was a very natural thing to happen, I think. I think that would have happened no matter what.
Well, there's something that someone had mentioned in the comments on the Contrarians episode saying that, wait a minute, this album still has prog tendencies.
It does.
Someone said that if you listen to it, Dennis brought back the Oberheim keyboard that he was using on Grand Illusion and Pieces of Eight on some of those synth solos and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They said, you guys need to someone, I can't remember who it was. Doesn't matter, but you guys really need to look at this again because they are going back to what came before.
Yeah.
It's not all modern keyboards on this. It has a lot, goes back to Grand Illusion. Which is
we talked a little bit about how it sounds, and as far as the quality of the engineering and the way the drum sound is, and the way the vocal mix is, it's very, very good. And I mean, we were getting really spoiled at this point. Yeah, and we were getting very spoiled. At 83, there was a lot of records that were coming out that sounded really good, and this was one of them. I mean, this was when all those Alan Parsons records were coming out. You had these great drum sounds that were large and in the front of the mix, and you had vocals that cut through, and a lot of really good stuff was happening. And this is one of the really good sounding records of this era, I think.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is a bit sterile. I will give it that, but I'm not saying it doesn't sound good. It sounds good, but it depends. I don't know. I much prefer Grand Illusion and Pieces of Eight sound.
1983 was not a warm year for.
Good point.
Which this clearly was.
Right. It's a different era, different time. You can't.
Agreed.
You have to look at these records as they stand on their own. You can't look at them with what came before. And it's hard to do that. It is hard to look at these records without looking at what came before.
This record on the charts was sitting there next to Thomas Dolby and Cyndi Lauper, and
I love that first Thomas Dolby album.
All of this, everything was changing.
Right. So, all right, kids, we're almost to an hour. I don't have to give my rating. You can look below in the Contrarian link. But we've got Todd Evans 7.5, and Paul is giving it a 6.
6.5.
All right, 6.5. So this gives everyone here, like I said, please check out the Contrarians episode in the below. But this gives you a little bit more of a insight into the record. You know, it's not total 0 points. I'm just saying. These guys, yeah, is this as good as what came before in Styx? No. But is it worse than what came after? Well, we'd have to look at that separate.
I always felt a little bit robbed that we didn't get to hear what comes next.
Yeah, I would have liked to have heard, but I remember when I was a
wanted to
kid.
hear what came next.
I mean, in '83 when this came out, I was done. I went, oh no, oh God.
Go back.
Though I like it much better now than I did then. Heck, if I could have Styx sounding like this now, who wouldn't want that? I'll just leave it there. Well, let's say this. There was something special about Dennis, JY, Tommy, Chuck, and John. The chemistry with all those guys. You take out one person, that changes the chemistry. And like a lot of bands, you know, you'll have a band that, oh my God, they put out great stuff. Someone leaves, it changes everything. And
I think Tommy leaving hurt them.
Oh God. Oh my God. Yeah. And who would have ever thought? Mm-hmm. Well, I would have thought because he was such a powerhouse, you know. But yeah, that hurt him. That hurt him big time. But whatever. So I don't know. This show's not going to change people's minds about this record, but it's interesting to look at it now as opposed to when it came out. And Todd and Paul, I don't think are going to throw this out with the baby in the bathwater. I suggest everybody to go and revisit the record. Leave a comment. What do you think about this record? How is this record aged? Is it as bad as what the reviews were at the time? I don't know. Martin Poffalf still gives it a 0. I don't know. I'm just saying. It's not as good as what came before. I'll leave it that. But really, kids, is it that bad? So I'm just going to leave it there. Todd,
Sounds like a good place.
Paul, do you have anything more to add as we wrap this up?
You said it all. Aloha.
You said it all. All right. Please like, subscribe. Check out these gentlemen on Rush Fans. There is supposed to be a Rush Fans episode, another collaboration between Contrarians and Rush Fans, but I just haven't got it together yet. But I will. So stay tuned for that. But please like, subscribe, check out these gentlemen. Please subscribe to Rush Fans. Check out the content over there. You can see Todd on Contrarians. You can see Todd on my show. Are you on anything else other than Rush Fans? Is that what? Well, now you're on my show, for God's sakes.
Right.
You can see Paul on my show and Rush Fans. So there you go. All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming on. This has to be one of the most fun discussions I've had because, you know, I love Styx. When I was a kid, God darn, I love Styx. And I was disappointed when this came out, but now I don't look at it I don't frown on it as much. So there you go. Check it out. Please leave a comment and we will see you later on the next episode. God knows what it's going to be. But take care, gentlemen. Thanks for coming on.